Greetings Exiles, BullShifter here, back with another PS4 Path of Exile video. Today I just wanted to briefly cover my Templar build. I know I've had quite a few people asking about it. I'm not going to go into ridiculous detail, but I would like to cover a good majority of some of the passive tree skills that I've chosen so far, kind of the reasoning behind them, how they pair up with my skill gems, and some of the basic attributes of my items. Typically when I go through a build, I would personally rather build it around a skill gem as opposed to an item, just because I know I can obtain a skill gem. When specific uniques, you can always buy them from other players. It's just not necessarily how I prefer to play. Some people actually will focus their entire build based around a couple of uniques. There's nothing wrong with it. It's one of the ways I would recommend doing it, either picking a skill gem that you'd really like to use, a unique, or a pairing of the two. So I've chosen a skill gem, and this build is actually a build that I used to use on PC when I first started playing. Well, it's a variation of it. It's not exactly what I used to use. When I first started playing, I found a build that I really liked. It was Ghazzy's Volatile Dead build. I found it on the forums, thought it was awesome, sounded like a lot of fun, and it was. And I kind of followed through all the steps until I got to, I'd say, close to level 30, maybe level 35, and then I kind of felt I had a better understanding of the game and some of the skills, so I kind of started branching out on my own and just doing some things that I wanted to do with the build, which, you know, is one of the things I would recommend doing. If you are going through someone else's build, really pay attention to the things that they're doing, and if you're comfortable at one point kind of breaking away from it and creating something of your own off of kind of the base set that they've put in place for you, I would absolutely encourage you to do that. It's originally what I did with this build, and I just kind of wanted to show you how everything ties together, so that maybe that way you'll feel a bit more comfortable creating your own build. I have a build that I plan on making completely from scratch, planned to use for streaming purposes, and it's something I want to reserve just for streaming. So what my plan is to eventually build a necromancer that focuses on summoning zombies and life leech. And once I've kind of gone through a few more of these tutorial videos and covered a lot of that, I do plan on doing some streams, and that will likely be the character I'll be streaming with, and I'll kind of go along with the entire build strategy and the process as we go along. So first, let's go ahead and look at this giant passive tree. So when you first start on the passive tree, you'll notice that you really only have a few different areas to break off in. Now, since I'm a Templar, the areas they give me are going to essentially be what I would consider, you know, kind of the strength route or the intelligence route, which there's kind of a middle one here as well. I started with damage and mana because this build, considering the fact that I do have to spam, well, I don't have to spam, but I have to hit Desecrate and then spam Volatile Dead, it has a large mana requirement. So it was important to start building damage and mana immediately, which is what I started with. And then I went with elemental damage, which I'm actually going to go ahead and we'll go back to my inventory so that way you can kind of see some of the skills that I'm using and the gems that are attached to them. So Volatile Dead, it's, you know, the bread and butter of the build. This is essentially what I'm trying to spam to clear out all the mobs and, you know, clear the screen. So it's pretty self-explanatory. You need corpses on the ground. It will turn them into giant fireballs, in which you spam all over the place, and they're enemy seeking. So once you spam those, they're going to look for any enemies within your area of effect and do that damage to them. Now, my support gems I have attached here, Controlled Destruction, so I have 100% reduced critical strike chance, but my skills deal more damage. Now the strategy behind that is, since I'm running an Inquisitor, you have a higher chance to put more crit on your Templar. So I plan on making this up through my Ascendancy, and I should be critting as much as I need to because the Inquisitor does have skills that give you more opportunities to crit. So basically it's to get that higher base damage so that I can then add that to my critical strike. So you kind of put yourself in a hole initially to increase your damage output later on. The other gem I have attached here is Elemental Focus. Also self-explanatory, it deals 44% more elemental damage. It's a fire skill, so it's all elemental. It cannot inflict ailments though. Now, ailments for this would be burn, so that would be dot damage or damage over time. That's not really important to me with Volatile Dead because I'm just spamming this attack essentially. I'm shooting these fireballs all across the screen. I don't really care about dot damage because I'm trying to clear the screen and clear these mobs faster than what dot damage would actually help me out with anyways. So I'm not really looking to burn, I'm looking to clear. And Spell Cascade support. This in a nutshell, it lowers my area of effect, which we're also going to pick up some skill nodes that will increase that back to where it should be. It's going to deal a little less damage, we're going to make that up as well. However, it's going to cast it in front and behind me. So that's going to create more orbs. So I have essentially a greater damage output just based off the fact that I'm sending more of these fire orbs out. Now there'll be a couple of other support gems that I do attach to this later on, just because right now I do have it socketed into only a 4-socket item. I just haven't really wanted to spend the currency yet to get an item that has the 6 sockets I need because I'm only level 62. I'll probably do that upon finishing chapter 10, or if at some point I kind of hit a wall with my build, then I'll look more into actually creating some items, and I'll make a future video on that as well for what to do once you kind of hit that wall to where you're not quite sure how to make your character stronger. Because typically what you're going to want to do is find an item, a base item. A lot of the times you can get them from the vendors in the game that has a decent amount of sockets that are connected, kind of re-rolling those sockets and then placing some of the attributes that you absolutely need on that item. I'm not going to go into huge detail about that. I will make a more comprehensive video about that in the future. But this essentially covers what my Volatile Dead attack is doing now and how I'm building around that. Now, one of my other big skills, I believe it's socketed into my gloves, yes, Desecrate. So this is what's actually going to spawn the corpses that I can use to hit Volatile Dead with. Now, this is a chaos attack, it's not a fire attack, but I'm not super concerned with that because this isn't my main damaging attack. But it is still a spell and it's still an area of effect attack. So it's still going to get some of the benefits of the skill nodes I'm going to show you in my passive tree. Now the support gems I'm using with this right now, and again this is another skill I'm going to add more onto, Arcane Surge support. So it'll track how much mana I spend on it and it'll grant me a buff when the mana reaches a certain threshold. So it's actually going to help me do a bit more spell damage, which will in turn do more damage with my Volatile Dead. So I need to spawn these corpses to initiate Volatile Dead anyways, so it's also acting as a damage buff now. And I also have the Spell Cascade on this skill as well, which, as I just described, it will spawn corpses in front and behind me, so then when I hit my Volatile Dead, I'm able to use all of those corpses in front and behind me. We're not too worried about the damage loss here either, because again, this isn't really my damage attack, this is my setup. Cremation, I don't really have any support gems on this now because this is actually just another skill. Once I have the correct items, I will be adding some more support gems to this, but this is essentially creating some large fire geysers that are stationary. I don't use them much for clearing mobs, but they're nice for boss battles because it just gives me that extra bit of DPS. Because Volatile Dead, it does some nice damage, but if you can add to it, you definitely want to take the opportunity to. Speaking of which, Herald of Ash is a great buff that will provide extra fire damage to your fire skills. This is an aura, so it's not something you have to actively use. You activate it, and then it will take a certain pool of your mana away from you, and I'll kind of show that later as well. Decoy Totem is a skill that I use strictly to keep some enemies off of me. I'm not really concerned with putting any support gems on it. It's literally just to spawn a totem out there to get enemies to focus on that totem, so I can just get some essentially free DPS while they attack that totem and completely ignore me. Clarity is another aura skill. It will help me regenerate my mana, since spamming Volatile Dead is very, it's going to spend through my mana quickly, so I want that regenerating quickly as well. We're also going to pick up some skills in the passive skill tree to help maintain our mana as well. The Lightning Golem, I'm strictly using this to give me more spellcasting speed. It has other benefits as well, and it can do a little bit of damage also, but it's really about that extra cast speed that I'm looking for. And increased area of effect, also pretty self-explanatory. Now here, I'm actually using Valgrace, which is going to make it more likely that I will dodge an attack. This is just essentially for boss battles, just so I'm taking potentially less of those really hard hits. I'm not too worried about the mobs. I don't use it too much with the mobs, but if I'm in a boss battle, it's very useful there. And also some support gems to help that out. This is just essentially to increase the duration. The other additions are nice for other skills, but for this skill in particular, I'm just looking to make it last longer. And this is the exact same thing. So basically, I'm putting more duration on my Valgrace. Now, this is my movement ability, Lightning Warp. It requires some help. Shield Charge is pretty ideal as a movement skill, just because of the fact that you don't need to really add any support gems to it to kind of zip across the map. Lightning Warp technically is a casted spell, so it's based off your casting speed. So faster casting will allow me to cast it quicker, obviously. Less duration will actually shorten the duration of the skill, so I can essentially warp and make it quicker so that I can warp again. And this essentially is just there to, again, reduce the duration of the supported skill. So I'm basically trying to cut that animation down so I can go ahead and use that travel skill a second time. I think for a majority, we've actually covered pretty much all the skills that I'm using. Now, one other thing I do want to note about these skills, because I'm technically using 9 skills right now, which you may think, well, you have X, which is your basic attack, and you can't really assign a skill there. Technically you can, but it's going to make picking up certain items really difficult. I've tried it, it doesn't work very well. I wouldn't suggest assigning a skill to X. So that kind of leaves you with 7 skills, because you can use your triangle, square, and circle, and then hold R2 and get these other ones. Now what you can do, get these guys out of here quick. What you can do is when you hit R3, I should have had these assigned in the beginning, but I don't. You can assign your auras and then cast them, and then assign something else to those 2 spots. So just to give a very clear example, I'll switch these back to my auras. Now, let's go ahead and uncast these. And as you can see, my mana bar is filling back up. That's because I don't have my auras going. so it's not taking that reserve from my mana bar, which is another reason why we need to stack mana, because even though we're getting some help regenerating that, we also need to be able to have enough mana while, you know, some of it's being held in reserve. So let's cast our auras. As you can see, it takes me down to about half. Let's get rid of this guy also. Now what you can do, my auras are going, I hit R3, and essentially just put other skills on top of them. Now what's great is, as you can see in my skill bar, my auras are still going. So I can come into the map, set my auras, and then change them to skills. So you can actually have auras going and then have skills replace those slots. So that way you're not wasting those slots and not, you know, being able to use an attack there. So that's kind of my life hack for the day. It's something I've made great use of, and it kind of brings the game more on pace to the PC version, where you do have an opportunity to put more skills there. So now that I've explained my skills, let's go to the passive tree, and I'll kind of explain to you some of the things we're doing here. So obviously we talked about the increased damage. Increased elemental damage is great for us to have with this build, because not only is it going to help out with our volatile dead and our cremation, but since our desecrate is also an elemental skill, even though it's chaos as opposed to fire, it's also going to get that 10% increased damage. Now, as I said, it's our setup skill, so we're not too concerned with it, but it's still nice to have some extra damage where we can have it. So I took a couple of these, and then we move on to just some more increased damage. The minions we don't care about really, we don't have any minions. This is essentially for the increased damage, the increased cast speed, and to add some strength and, most importantly, intelligence to our build. Now we're going to add strength, intelligence, and some dexterity throughout this skill tree, simply so we can actually equip our skill jumps. We can also add those through our gear, but it's nice to have some in your passive skill tree as well, so that way you're not relying on those slots with, you know, those affixes on your gear. So you can actually use those on other things, such as life, mana, most importantly resistances, and different damage types. Intelligence is going to be an important one for us to stack as a Templar, because obviously we're going to be using a lot of blue gems for support, as well as the fact that intelligence will actually give us a bonus to our energy shield as well. It's just each attribute will give you a bonus. Intelligence will give you a bonus to energy shield, dexterity will give you a bonus to evasion, and strength will give you a bonus to straight life. So that's just something to keep in mind also while you're building your character. Here, we're just adding some extra life. We're going to stack that where we can. Area of effect damage. All of our spells are area of effect, so this is super useful for us to have. Area of effect, again, and more damage to our area of effect attacks. So that's a really nice node for us to have as well. More area damage, self-explanatory. More intelligence, as I told you, we were going to stack that. More elemental damage, again, it benefits all of our skills. This gives us some nice elemental resistances, some elemental damage. We don't care about the 5% chance to freeze, shock, and ignite, because we're not really going to be focused on that. We actually have a skill gem attached to our volatile dead that's not going to allow for us to ignite enemies. And physical damage isn't really a big deal to us either. More elemental, some strength, essentially so we can get to these life nodes. That was the whole point of that. The 20 strength is also nice as well. Now, the reason why I don't really go over here is simply because of the fact that these are very specific nodes that are going to require me to typically use a specific type of attack or weaponry. You know, these are minions. We don't have any minions. Our totems are strictly there to draw aggro, so it's just not that useful to us. So that's why I'm not really going over here to any of these nodes. Now, for certain builds, those are going to be super useful. However, for this build, we're just not really interested in that. So we're going to come up the tree here because we want to grab these life nodes here. That's the biggest reason. The plus to strength is nice too, but we really want that extra life there. More intelligence, as you can see. Now here we've got mana regeneration and life, which is a great combo for this build, because as I said, we need to be able to maintain our mana to spam that attack, and extra life. Always grab extra life. The tankier you can be in this game, the better. And we're also going to get some life regen, which is super nice. Now we're going to go through, grab some intelligence, some strength, intelligence. Here's some more spell damage, increased cast speed, and another 20 intelligence. So it's another really nice node for us. Here, we're going to start making up for some of that critical strike chance that we lost with our support gem for Volatile Dead. So that's going to be nice to have. And also when we get more into our Inquisitor Ascendancy, which I'll show you here, we can use Righteous Providence, which is going to give us 100% increased critical strike chance against enemies that are affected by no elemental ailments. Now that's another reason why our Volatile Dead, we don't want it to ignite enemies, because that's an elemental ailment. So since the elemental ailments have been disabled, we are going to get that 100% increased critical strike chance when we spam our Volatile Dead, which is going to help us offset that penalty that we kind of put ourselves in earlier. So that's just something to keep in mind for later on down the road. More critical strike chance. Critical strike multiplier is going to give us more critical damage when we do crit. Now, what I'm essentially trying to do here in this tree is form a nice balance between crit damage and base damage, because the game does have an equation to where you're going to want a nice balance of both of them. Because if you just stack crit and you don't stack any of that base damage, that elemental damage, that area damage, the way the equation works, it's just not going to produce the damage output you're looking for. So you want to find a nice balance between the two. So over here, obviously minion, we don't care about that. More mana and life. More mana. More energy shield, because that's the other defensive skill that we're going to build. More intelligence, which in turn is also giving us more energy shield. Mana and mana regen. You know, it's it kind of gets really self-explanatory once you start to get into this and you've decided, you know, this is my character's focus, this is what I want to do with my build, and you just build around that. And as you pass through nodes, you know, this may be useful for us to pick up, you know, spell damage and some of the cast speed. But when I got here, just that mana and life is more important at the moment. And we really wanted to get to some of these other nodes over here. And since they have, you know, kind of a greater output, and they actually have some of these larger nodes that we can hit, and this one doesn't, that's the only reason I've really passed this up for now. If I have the extra points at the end, I may put them there. However, at this point, I do feel like with where I am at in the skill tree, we'll get to it, but over here in this area, there's a lot of really nice life nodes that I'm going to want to pick up to make my character that much tankier, because their damage output really isn't bad. So again, you know, more mana up here. More area of effect. See, we had increased spell damage, which would be nice. 30% increased spell damage, you know, 12 more, 16 more there. However, you know, we can pick up extra area of effect damage and increase our area of effect in general. And Volatile Dead, we want it to spread out as far as it can, so we can spam it quickly and have it spread even further. So that's another reason to kind of prioritize that over the other damage we could potentially do. Now we're going to grab some more intelligence through here. Obviously lightning damage isn't useful to us. Fire and cold damage is just kind of a bit of a waste for us. Minion life we don't need, we don't channel, so we're just going to kind of skip past all that stuff. More intelligence here. More life and energy shield. Absolutely need those nodes, so that's why we took those there. Intelligence, some more crit, because we're an Inquisitor, so that's going to come in handy. You know, critical strike multiplier, give us more of that critical damage. Physical and chaos damage, doesn't matter, we don't care about that. Damage over time, we don't do dot damage, so we skip past that also. We get down to here, more attack damage, not a big deal, but more spell damage, mana regen, more intelligence, great node for us to have. So we take that one there. More crit, we take that. More crit, we take that. So you can kind of see what I'm getting at here. So this is where I've pretty much finished up at as of now with 62, at level 62 I should say. However, you can probably kind of see where I'm going to be going. You know, more critical strike chance. We're going to grab some more life nodes here. We're going to get some leech life. This is kind of what I was telling you about earlier, where this is kind of the area where we can grab a lot of great life nodes to become tankier. I believe there's some... I will go over power charges in a video also. I'm going to go through all of the charges. If you have the right gear or the right skills, power charges are relatively easy to maintain if you know what you're doing. I wouldn't recommend doing a build around them until you're a bit more experienced with them and understand them and have actually decided that you're going to use skill gems that are going to easily generate these, so that way you can grab these nodes that will increase the duration, give you more charges, and benefit you more. For this build, I've decided against it, even though it does stack up our crit. I decided against it strictly so I could just grab some more life nodes. Here is a jewel socket. We'll probably build to that also, just because jewels can be super powerful in this game. I'll show you some jewels in a moment. But here again, more leech damages life, more life, and leech damage more leech life is going to be really useful with this build because we're sending out so many projectiles in order to get that life back. So you can probably get an idea of where I'm going with a majority of my skill tree. We want life, we want intelligence, we want area damage, we want to cast our spells faster. It all intertwines with each other, and that's something to keep in mind when you're building your character, is you want to stay focused on exactly what you're going to do. All of our skills are area of effect, all of our skills are spells, all of our skills are elemental. So there's a lot of things we can ignore. We can ignore minion nodes, we can ignore attack nodes, we can ignore physical attack, we can ignore ice, we can ignore lightning. They don't matter to us. It just makes it that much easier for us to go through this passive tree and be efficient. So it's just something I would keep in mind when you are building your character, is to just know what you want your character to do. That's the most important thing. If you have a focus for your character and a strong idea, all your skills intertwine, they all serve a purpose, it's going to be so much easier for you to go through this passive tree and select nodes that are actually going to be meaningful and important to your build. That's kind of what I learned and there's probably still, it's been a while since I've looked at that build that this originally was based off of, but there's probably still a lot of his original tree in here because of the fact that he did that so well. And I had looked at a few of his builds when I first started playing that game, and that's something that I always noticed that he did, is he was very focused and very concise in the passives that he chose. And that's what you want to do. If you have to sit and debate whether a node is actually going to be worth it or not, it probably isn't. You're probably thinking too hard about it. Is this tree gigantic? Yes, but there are so many things that you can skip past because they're just not going to be useful for your character. And something that can also be useful is, you know, we started down here because we're a Templar. Go through and just kind of scroll through and see where these nodes end up and kind of decide what's going to be more useful to you. Now, we could have gone this way. You know, we could have grabbed some life down here, The only problem with that is this portion of the board over here just had a lot more overall useful large nodes. These large nodes always offer bigger benefits than the smaller ones. And if we had came over here, we would have kind of pigeonholed ourselves into, you know, armor and just totem damage, melee critical. You know, it gets more strength focused over here. And while we do have some strength skill gems, it's not what we're looking for. Over here, and you can kind of gauge based off of the 3 elements also. The green kind of insinuates that we might see, you know, more dexterity stuff over this way. And we need the dexterity, even though the Templar doesn't focus on it, because our skill gems focus on it. Our attack skill gems are all dexterity based. So it's helpful to grab some of those random dexterity nodes throughout this skill tree, so that way we don't have to focus on it so much with our items. That's the last thing I briefly wanted to go over was items. As I said, I don't focus on a unique for most of my builds, simply because of the fact that I don't want to make things difficult on myself by having to spend a bunch of currency on a really super good unique in order to make my build work. If I find it with one character and I can place it on another, that's a whole other story. Or if I build up enough currency with a character, that's a whole other story. But going into your season, I would try and build something that may not necessarily be so high budget. Mainly what I've focused on with my items here is, one, making sure I've had the attributes that I need in order to be able to equip all my gems, which you can see simply from hovering over your item. For all of my gems I have in this item, you know, I need to have a base of 83 dexterity, 96 intelligence, and I have that. You can go over to your character and you can actually see what attributes you currently have for that at the moment. So that's the first thing I focus on. The other, mana, again. We're going to eat through a lot of mana, so I want to make sure I have a lot of mana. Chaos resistance doesn't really matter, but these aren't perfectly rolled items. I'm still leveling up, so I just want to find items that essentially have the sockets that I need, the socket connections, and more skills or more affixes that I can use as opposed to ones that aren't useful towards me. Something else that's useful, you know, I have increased fire damage here, increased resistances, increased cast speed. You know, that's while ignited, so that doesn't necessarily work with my volatile dead skill, but you know, that fire resistance on this ring and that fire damage is really nice. It's a low level item, but I just haven't been able to replace it quite yet from what I've looted. Accuracy rating doesn't matter. Life is huge, mana is huge. You know, when you're leveling, your items aren't going to be perfect. You're going to worry about that more either A, when you hit a wall, or B, once you hit endgame, and then you want to optimize so you can run higher tier maps. So don't stress too much if your items aren't perfect. They're not going to be. You're essentially just trying to get by. Going through these first 10 chapters, you're trying to make sure you can continue to progress, continue to level, continue to make your build better. So that's essentially everything in a nutshell that I wanted to share with you on just getting that first, you know, basic build done. It's not going to be perfect. You're going to make many builds. You're going to make mistakes. It's not a huge deal. Just make sure you're focused, make sure you know what you want to build, and more often than not, your build will work because of it. So as we conclude the video, again, I want to thank you guys for watching. It's been awesome. I started doing these videos 2 weeks ago. When I first started, I had 8 subscribers. Last I checked, we are at over 560 subscribers. It's a great feeling. I really appreciate you guys being a part of the channel. It's been an awesome 2 weeks. I hope you guys enjoy the videos. I'm going to continue to make them, and as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I'm going to start doing some streaming once I've gotten through a majority of the tutorial videos that I want to do. I haven't decided yet if I want to strictly stream through YouTube or if I want to stream on Twitch and then later on post those videos to YouTube. If you guys have any input on that in the comment section, yeah, I'd greatly appreciate it, because, you know, I want you guys watching the stream. It would mean a lot to have you guys there for the stream. So just let me know, and I will plan accordingly. Again, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something from this video. I know it was a bit long. I probably went through a lot of information, but hopefully I didn't go too fast, and hopefully I was concise enough in what I was saying to where you feel a bit more comfortable with the passive tree and understand the importance of syncing what you're doing with your skill gems, your items, and your passive tree to create a build that's going to be useful and fun. That's my last tip about builds. Make something fun. Go in with an idea, no matter how crazy it might be, as long as it all ties in together, it can potentially work. So be creative, have fun, plan accordingly. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, may the RNG be with you, always.